we looked. After the second dose, at least 80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. So, are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. The FDA is the gold standard of regulators, and their current guidance on this, if they stick with that, is very, very appropriate. And you know, the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose, and so to get the antibodies. Some of the other vaccines are able to go with lower doses to get responses that are pretty high, including the J&J and the Pfizer. And so there's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines. It's great that we have multiple of them that are
Bill,
going out there. And yes, I think
you know the data
US
better than I do. But the data showed that everybody with a high dose had a side effect.
In addition to their interest in vaccines, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation donates money to media organisations such as the BBC, universities that provide media representatives, and in partnership with the World Economic Forum, Event 201, which simulated a coronavirus-induced pandemic 5 months prior to the actual pandemic.
On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose.
A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics.
By the turn of the 20th century, 90% of all US refineries were controlled by John Rockefeller, who went on to monopolize the pharmaceutical industry. He had 6 children who founded Venrock, a venture capital company which made investments in tech companies such as Apple and Intel. In 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation released a document called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development, which described a pandemic scenario with the headline, "A world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership." During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy in exchange for greater safety and stability. This heightened oversight took many forms, such as biometric IDs for all citizens. While there's no evidence to suggest that this 10-year-old document has any relation to the current pandemic, it was accurate in predicting many extreme restrictions that are being imposed on us today. Recently, in December 2020, the Rockefeller Foundation published this report. COVID-19 vaccines have arrived, with enough supply to vaccinate as many as 50 million people by the end of January. But these initial doses will do little in the short term to arrest an epidemic that is raging out of control. By the end of January, the country will likely be able to conduct more than 70 million tests each week, a number that is expected to double to 200 million by April 2021. They advised the US government students should be tested at least once a week, every week. Does advice from a large US organisation have the potential to influence UK government policy.
The Health Secretary this evening announced an emergency targeted testing programme for secondary schools.
We've decided to put in place an immediate plan for testing all secondary school age children in the 7 worst affected boroughs of London, in parts of Essex that border London and parts of Kent.
The test used to detect positive cases is called PCR, and it only requires very small samples to see if there's any virus present. Now, PCR doesn't tell you if what it detects is infectious. It may pick up on virus fragments from a past infection that isn't currently making you sick. Now, this means there could be false positives, so there's a positive test result, but no active infection.
Let's deal with this test for infection, the PCR. I want to ask you if you think it's reliable enough. Dr. Daniels.
I'm an NHS clinician, and we've got experience with these PCR tests for many, many years. And the reality is we always take the results with a little bit of a pinch of salt. You test 1,000 people, one of whom is positive, but the test will pick up 6 people if it's got a 0.5% false positive rate. That's significant if it's being used to drive policy decisions.
If you're tested repeatedly, the odds become greater and greater that you will get a positive test, and it's a convenience for whoever is playing some macabre game, because I don't think it's an error anymore. But this industrial scale PCR test, they don't release even the basic information about it, like the false positive rate. It's unbelievable that public health people who do know better, I've spoken to some people in it, and they're embarrassed. They're not even being allowed to characterize and publish the information you would need to know to work out how useful the test is. That's not being done. It's full steam ahead.
With the PCR test providing a high rate of false positives, is their intention to boost infection rates in order to justify more lockdowns? In the early 90s, disease mongering was a strategy coined by pharmaceutical companies for creating a disease and scaring people, then offering a pre-planned drug. If today's most powerful people wanted to accelerate the shift towards the 4th Industrial Revolution by removing jobs and reinventing capitalism, this problem reaction solution strategy would be effective in achieving it. 1. Create a problem